Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. We are 3 weeks away. Well, actually, 3 weeks minus a day away from the end of the regular season. Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. There we go. It never fails.
I was like a second off. It's terrible.
For those who want to hear my voice twice. The race in the East is, I think, clearing a bit. Although when Eck gets on here, I'm sure he'll tell us we're wrong.
Yeah.
But we'll start with the pre-show stuff, and I have a rant that will probably take up a third of the show about the Maple Leafs. But go ahead, Russ.
Okay. So pre-show, right now it's kind of an interesting time in Philly for baseball because, the Phillies signed Bryce Harper, and Bryce Harper hasn't gotten a hit yet in the spring. But again, it's spring. I don't really put too much stock in that, so that's fine. But a story came out that in September of last year with the Phillies, players were playing Fortnite during the game, to the point when Carlos Santana, who is no longer with the team, went back to in the training room or wherever it was, back in the other part of the locker room, not in the dugout, and smashed the television that the Fortnite was connected to so nobody could play. I give him high marks for that, but the problem is Gabe Kapler just said in his experience for teams that are out of it, like that was something that he had seen before. And I got to tell you, Gabe Kapler, I felt like was on a short leash anyhow. I think the leash just got shorter.
Now, they were in it until about, early September, and then they fell off?
Yeah.
So this probably happened in the last 3 weeks of the season. I mean, the funny thing is because we've heard the Fortnite stuff with hockey players and various, teams and junior and even NHL teams, and there's not as much downtime for those guys as in baseball, where there's downtime during the game. If you're not in it, if you're a pitcher who's already if you're in the rotation and you threw the last game, actually, you probably shouldn't even be in the bullpen. You could basically stay away, but they want you there for camaraderie and everything else. But you have downtime there, so what are you supposed to do? You're probably playing some ball buster game.
Here's the quote.
Wasn't it Glavine or Smoltz who had a deal when they were on to go golfing, right? Yes. On off days, even when they were on the road, they worked out with the manager. Well, look, you can throw your back out swinging a golf club. We all know that. But from a point of view of what would you rather your players doing, I'm going to take golf 10 times out of 10 than sitting in front of video games, because there's an element there that isn't involved in video games in terms of activity, usage, socializing, different things that isn't there with Fortnite. That's
right. Hold on. So this is the backtracking. Gabe Kapler did some backtracking. He spoke before the Phillies game yesterday and said he's unaware of players partaking in video games while the team was on the field and classified such behavior as unacceptable 100%. But the original quote was this: in the middle of summer, the chemistry of the clubhouse was very good. As we struggled at the end, understandably, tensions ran high. Carlos became frustrated, as happens in high-tension situations. He responded by smashing up some TVs. I don't think that's uncommon. If we're supposed to believe Gabe Kapler didn't know why, he doesn't understand the Philly market and baseball fans, because I think we all could figure out what happened.
And I'll tell you right now, like in New York, and you remember this, Russ, remember the poker playing in the locker room. That was the Bobby Bonilla era.
I think it was him and Ricky. I think him and Ricky were playing.
Right. Yeah, and Ricky don't know why his cleats keep on breaking, but anyway. But no, and that would not be acceptable for the Yankees either. My God, it's like, Aaron Boone is like sort of a, sensitive new age manager, at least that he's been sold as that, and in touch with the younger guys. But I don't think like in New York that would be acceptable. So
I think Gabe sort of playing dumb to it was a bad idea yesterday. He should have just copped to it and said, you know what? I found that it happened and we took care of it.
I don't know how much Gabe is playing dumb. I've heard him interviewed on the Jim Rome show numerous times back in the day. He doesn't sound like the sharpest tool in the shed, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, and that's fine. But again, he knows why the guy smashed the television. He also knows if guys were playing during the game. We all know they probably were playing while the game was going on. We know baseball players well enough to put that 2 and 2 together. The fact that he sort of let it hang out there now and just saying, oh, it's unacceptable. Well, it did happen in your clubhouse.
Right. So you have to own it and know about it.
Yeah, so that's again. I think he's got a short leash. We'll see.
Okay. One thing, then we'll get started here. In my particular area of living, a Chick-fil-A restaurant opened in, I think, late November.
Right.
There were lines around the block for this Chick-fil-A for months, for a couple months, to the point that there was like a road rage incident outside of it when somebody cut off somebody else. I mean, just stupid stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'll wait till the fervor drops down before. I've never tried Chick-fil-A, but I go, oh, it's good. Okay.
No, it's very good. There's no question.
Yeah. And I actually got some things done early today, so I went there about noon and didn't wait for the drive-through, parked and went in and got the sandwich and everything. Place is packed on a Monday at 12.
Well, that's because they're closed on Sunday too.
Right. So yeah. So but got the sandwich and say, okay, I would say thumbs up, but not to the point that like people are killing themselves to get this friggin' sandwich. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I mean, Krispy Kreme's opened up here about 15 years ago, and there were lines around the block for.
Well, you said this happened in your neighborhood about Moe's. I mean, that should have happened for.
Well,
Moe's.
it did. No, it did. That died in a week.
Okay.
That died in a week. I mean, we're in March now. This opened in November, and there was still a line of, I'd say, 10 cars in the drive-through and no spots in the parking lot. I mean, insane.
That's pretty normal. I'm going to answer Esmir here because he said he understands why teams have problems with video games. He'd rather have players play video games than something that can get them in trouble with the law. And he agreed with what I just said. But my whole thing is you don't have a TV set up with a game on game day. So that means before the game and after the game. You want to do it at the hotel on your time?
Right.
That's fine. The fact that Gabe let that slip to the point where that was hooked up at some point, there should be no TV back there for the players, period.
Right. Now, I don't have a problem with players on the road bringing their video, and I've heard about this. They bring their video games with them in their luggage, and they plug it into the TV and they play like when after the game or whatever.
I'm fine with that.
That's fine because that's sort of on their time. And but if they're losing sleep because they're up till 4 o'clock in the morning, then that's got to be a problem. So
now, if Gabe's going to come back and let's say he were to answer me, well, we were showing video footage of players or whatever on that TV, then my answer would be, then put the TV away.
Right.
Lock it away well before the game starts.
So
it's not being used just for that.
So the TV is on a cart like it used to be in school, and they would wheel it in and plug it in.
Yeah.
Jeez. Oh my God. Anyway, hello Hockey World. Today is Monday, March 18th, 2019.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Peter Tessier. I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Peter will be joining us once he gets done with this phone call, and Ack will be joining us in a few minutes.
I'm Peter Tessier, and my grandfather's father's hairdresser's sister was actually related to George Washington. I'll tell you more about it later. That's my Peter Tessier.
The 2 degrees of Peter Tessier. I was at a place in dinner with Sarah McLaughlin, who was hosting the Junos yesterday and looked fantastic, by the way. Okay. All right. Let's get started with the story that I've been focused on for the last 48 hours, which is the impending demise of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I'm saying that in jest, but the way that they're playing right now, I think if they play that way against Boston, it's a very quick out for the blue and white. But just to give you a little bit of a background here, 4 games last week, they gave up 23 goals against, lost 3 of them. One of them to the worst team in the NHL, the Ottawa Senators, which you could see coming because, Ottawa doesn't have much to play for, so work themselves up into a lather against their rival. I get it. And they're a bunch of young, talented kids, and but they didn't see. The thing is, they didn't get beat by Brady Tkachuk. They got beat by Rudy Balcers and Magnus PRV. So they gave up 23 goals. The only game that they won was a 7-6 sloppy affair against the Philadelphia Flyers last Friday. The defense is playing terribly. Freddie Anderson was pulled from 2 games last week. Garrett Sparks gave up 6 goals. on Saturday and basically decided to say that to call out his teammates for not playing with emotion and that he had to play with more emotion and everybody else had to play with more emotion. I mean, Russ, it's just right now, it's not a crisis because they're 3 weeks away from the playoffs, but something is not right in Toronto right now.
Sure. First off, I want to give myself tremendous credit by saying John Tavares would have a career year for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he is having the best year of his career, so good for me on that. Now to the negative stuff. Now, I think, and I've looked at this, and I've been looking at the Leafs more and more, trying to figure out what I think their problems are. No, I don't watch every game. Honestly, this is at the end of the season, this is going to be a 50-50 split of blame between the GM and the coach. It is. And I'll tell you why. The GM tried to get more defensemen in there and players in there, but he didn't know the extent of the Jake Gardiner injury. Neither did the coach. Now, the coach has resisted by playing other players that the GM has gotten, like Nick Patan and otherwise, and he has resisted lineup changes for a while now. He's sort of messing around with stuff, as you told me. But the GM definitely could have shored up the offense even a little bit more by getting a defensive forward. He could have done something like that just to say, even up the middle, look, Gauthier is a decent player. We could get somebody that could play a better brand of defense for that energy line. And if they did that, I probably wouldn't even be putting Kyle Dubas in any kind of bad light. But now I think it's 50-50, and I think the blame is going to be going around. And I don't see a way for them out of this unless Boston just has tremendous injuries in that series.
Well, I mean, you eliminated or did not include the part of the organization that may be mostly responsible, and that's the players themselves. Now you can
that's always last. That's
you can say, okay, and you can always say, well, it's easier to blame the coach or easier to blame the management instead of blaming 20 players. And but I think there's enough blame to go around. I wrote yesterday, I said I called it a
but the players don't get fired, right?
No,
whatever.
But you can trade them, yeah. But I called it a multi-system failure, Russ.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think is sort of troubling because I think Dubas has done a pretty good job. He got Tavares there. He sold Tavares on Toronto. I think the Jake Muzzin deal was good, and Muzzin has played okay, but it's tough to come in late in the season.
Misused. I did. Muzzin, and the game that he scored 2 goals, he still was scoring them off the third pairing. Like, what the hell's going on? Like, Jake Muzzin should not be on the third pairing.
Well, he wasn't on the third. He was on the second.
It seemed like a third. Okay.
He's playing. Well, Zaitsev should be on a third pairing,
but I think that was the second for that. Okay.
Yeah, he's on the second. And but this is the thing. If they didn't know about the Gardiner injury, they should have known about the Gardiner. They knew Gardiner was having back problems. He had missed games with back spasms. And then after the deadline, he played the game on Friday, on Monday against the Leafs, and then hasn't played since. I know that, and I wanted to wait till Eck gets on here to talk about the Gardiner thing because he wrote a little bit about it on the weekend, and I think he's a little off base on it simply because he's putting the downfall right now because of Gardiner, and it's multiple things on top of that, but. They didn't get a depth defenseman at the deadline. Right. I talked about like a Beaulieu or a Delzato. I'm not saying that those guys would have been answers, but to have one of them instead of Martin Marincin or Justin Hall, who was -4 against Ottawa. And by the way, it's like he's played 6 games this year. He had a good game on Friday. He had a terrible game on Saturday, and Babcock will basically send him to Siberia now. He'll probably won't play him again because he went -4 in a game.
Yep.
They're rotating. And this is the insight here. On Friday, when I was up in Toronto, Babcock said one of Marincin, Ozaganoff, or Hall is going to have to take one of the open spots. Dermott's going to be back, and he didn't say anything about Gardiner. So that tells you they're not. I don't think they're expecting Gardiner to come back.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then the other thing is maybe they call Callie Rosen up from the Marlies, and he's been hurt. He's coming back supposedly this week. He'll probably play a couple of games in the AHL, and then he's going to get called up. But you're relying on a guy who's played 4 NHL games, Callie Rosen, a guy who has proved that all he does what he does best is give away the puck, Marinson, a guy that clearly the coach doesn't trust, Hall, and a 25-year-old Russian who every time there's back-to-back games, he is rested like a goaltender. He plays one game and can't play the second one, or they don't want to play him the second one. So, I mean,
that's probably a sports science thing for some reason.
Well, I don't know, but all I know is that the 37-year-old or 38-year-old Ron Hainsey plays both ends to the back-to-back. You'd think that the sports science people would rest that guy, but they're so dependent on him with Morgan Riley that they have to play him.
That's the issue.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, okay, I'm not expecting the Leafs to have created the Stanley Cup contender in one season.
Right.
But what you do expect is progress, and progress this year is winning a round. And I don't know unless Matthews and Marner and Tavares turn around or step up, and Frederick Anderson gains his midseason form, how they beat the Bruins. Well, I don't know how they do it.
Here's the other thing that we've talked about all year, which again is an equal blame issue, and this is again with management. So the goaltending. Babcock plays Anderson too much. We know that. Mm-hmm. Babcock probably doesn't play Sparks enough because he doesn't trust him enough. That's on Dubas because Dubas extended Sparks. They traded McElhinney because probably they both didn't like him enough.
No. They waived him.
No, they waived him. But you know what I mean? Like neither Babcock or Dubas liked him enough to not do that.
I see. I disagree. Babcock wanted him. I think this was all Dubas.
Okay.
He had Sparks would have had to clear waivers. That meant he was going to get claimed, right. And probably McElhinney or Pickard were going to get claimed. And he figured one of those guys would slip down and be the Marlies goalie, and he would rather keep a 25-year-old than a 35-year-old. The problem is that the 25-year-old never proved he could play in the NHL, and he is 7-7-1 with a goals against over 3 and a save percentage below average. And the points that they've lost in the games that he has played have cost them home ice advantage.
Well, then I'm still going to hear me out on the Babcock thing. You might be right as far as this being all Dubas, but it's not like Babcock ever even played McElhinney 20 games because he didn't.
No, he played him in he played him in back-to-backs all the time, and then at the end of the season he gave Anderson a little bit of a rest and played him a game or so extra. But no, that's
still on Babcock for never utilizing his backup enough.
Right.
And now it seems like he doesn't like this backup enough to utilize him.
Well, it was funny because, I mean, Babcock is all about keeping options open. And when I was at training camp in Niagara Falls in September, we asked him about, the usage of the goaltender. And he said, well, ideally, I'd like to use him a certain amount, but it depends on where the race is. And he keeps his options open. And, while they're still mathematically alive for home ice advantage, he's going to play Anderson every non-back-to-back game. And they have two back. And I wrote in my column today, one thing they should have thought of earlier is when Michael Hutchinson played pretty well in January when Anderson and Sparks were hurt. They should have kept Hutchinson up and tried to sneak Sparks through waivers. And if he gets claimed, then be damned. Who cares? But you need the better backup. But now Anderson's going to play over 60 games. Sparks hasn't proved anything other than he can work his mouth and call out his teammates when he's playing terribly. So, I mean, now
I'm going to go back, Mike. We're going to harken back to 02-03 when that was the first time I ran into Mike Babcock. He was in the Stanley Cup with the Ducks. That year, he played J.S. Giguère the most games he's played in his career, 65. Mm-hmm. But he played Gerber 22. Now,
yeah.
He liked Gerber. There was no question. He never even played McElhinney over 20 games in a year, which again just shows that he's probably gotten worse at figuring out the goaltending than better.
Well, go ahead.
There's no secret that teams get coaches, particularly guys like the hyper type A's, like the Babcocks, the Maurices, the Vigneaults. They get trust issues. Mm-hmm. They build the trust issues into things, and all of a sudden, the decisions aren't really. If you understand that they have trust issues, you realize, wait a second, this explains the decision. Not that the decision is right, but it gives you the understanding of why they've arrived at this decision. And it's clear to me that Babcock has some major trust issues. And that's just part of who he is. So you ride with what you trust.
Yeah, and he's proved that by playing his defense, the top 4 of his defense right now, 25 minutes a night, and playing the bottom pairing who he doesn't trust 10 or 11 minutes. Now, I just want to bring this up, and then we can move off the Leafs. Yeah. But when you mentioned Gardner in one of your posts this weekend, the thing is, the failing of the team right now has little to do with the absence of Gardner. It's the fact that Gardner and Dermott, who is his direct replacement, who's probably going to be the guy who steps up into the top 4 next year in place of Gardner once he leaves, both got hurt on the same night. Yeah. Gardner's out. I mean, it sounds like Gardner may be out for the year because there's been no update on him. And Dermott's going to be out until probably late this month or early next month. And when both of them go down at the same time and the deadline is passed and you have no options, and then you have the main replacement, the guy who's having a good year down in the AHL, Rosen, he's also hurt. I mean, it's on Dubas to have at least backed up his team like Cheveldayoff did with Nathan Beaulieu for a 6th round pick. Just get somebody who has played in the NHL who could step in instead of this rotation of death that they have with Hall, Ozaganov, and Marinson that the coach can't even trust them. So I think it has little to do with Gardner, but the interesting thing is
it has something to do with Gardner. I mean, it's like, the bottom line.
Gardner was a defensive liability when he played, but he's better than saying he's better than Martin Marinson. I'll use the analogy. It's like saying Mussolini is better than Hitler. They're both psychos.
Here's the thing. Gardner may not be great defensively, but sometimes you don't need to be a defensive wizard. You can get the puck up and out. The best defense is having the puck outside of your blue line. And someone who moves it up, particularly in a transition game, like a Marner or a Nylander. Or a Matthews.
That's I think you're totally right.
The list goes on.
That's exactly it. I mean, it's not like I'm not. No one says Gardner's like a 4-4 in Stratomatic terms or anything like that. You know, he's a
4-1.
He's a 4-2.
No.
We'll give him a 4-2. He reminds me of like 4-2s. Like, for those who don't know Stratomatic, the old Stratomatic hockey people, like the rankings went from 1 being the worst to 4 being the best. So you had first was offense and then was defense. So a 4-2 would be really, really good offensively, really mediocre defensively with a 2 rating. I don't put him at a 4-1 though. There are worse defensive, and
he's the modern day Mike Green. He's a Mike Green defensive.
If for no other reason than what just Peter said. I mean, there is something. Defenseman at least is half decent defensively if he keeps it out of his own end. Like, you know, like if he's moving
the puck on to the puck, and then
right. I mean, he's not going to be great
for him to have the puck than some other guys.
But he's not great 1-on-1, but he's going to help the Leafs at least keep the puck down the other end, which is.
But the interesting thing, because right now, if he comes back, he comes back. Right now, everything is shrouded in secrecy. But the thing is, he's going into unrestricted free agency. If this back problem is something where he has to have surgery, that's going to kill a lot of interest in terms of him on the market, where he may not get the long-term deal. He may get a short-term deal. That might include him. That might not prevent him from coming back with the Leafs for 1 year on a prove-it deal because he's comfortable there. He likes Toronto, and that they pay him what he's making right now. They probably would do that, and he probably would do that. But you know, it's going to definitely affect him getting big money because a back injury can be debilitating.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how bad it is. I mean, and there will definitely be, you know, these guys. I mean, their agents will have him meet with 100 doctors, and everything that's going to sign him is going to see whether he's in shape or not. Basically, no one's going to. If he signs a big contract, people will know he's pretty much fine. Or you know, I mean, injuries can always happen.
I think you're missing some strategy here too, Mike. If the Leafs could sign him to a short-term deal, they also could make it that he is not protected for Seattle.
True. That's true.
Right.
And then that solves everybody's problem.
Well, that may be the reason why, Russ, they're not calling up Liljegren, they're not calling up Sandin, because if they play anything, they play 10 games.
10 or more games, they start. It's more than 10 games, then they start that clock. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It depends.
It does matter. You have to protect him, Mac. It does.
No, you do. You do have to protect him. No, I agree. But the tricky thing here is with both Boston and Toronto, are both teams that are technically like in the top 5 points wise in the NHL, right? I mean, they're really now, are they any team in the top 5 points wise in the NHL? It should be considered a Stanley Cup contender,
right? Except when they're playing each other in the first round.
Yeah, they're playing each other, but and that definitely hinders one of them for sure. But the other, and that's another ridiculous thing, which we can obviously get into. We will get into. We have gotten into. But to me, how the Leafs treated the deadline, like you're saying, Mike, I agree. Like when you're a top 5 team, you have to go out there and reinforce for things like this to happen. You have to go out there and get some guys. Like people are mocking, they mock like crazy the Penguins picking up of Gabranson, and stuff like that, But
no, I think Rutherford was. I mean, honestly, getting Gabranson for Tanner Pearson and getting Chris Weidman, who's been around the league so much after the video in Arizona. But he's an NHL player.
Yeah,
getting him for nothing, getting Gabranson for Pearson. I mean, those were moves made at the 11th hour, and they proved to be valuable for Pittsburgh.
I saw Gabranson play last night. He looked pretty good, I'm not saying he's the greatest thing since sliced bread, but
don't say that. The analytics crowd will hate you.
Oh, I know, but analytics and defensemen are like two things that don't necessarily go together, in my opinion. Like the analytics thing.
Martin Marinson's an all-star according to them.
Yeah, you got it. You definitely have to watch defensemen, but we were having a text message thing on the weekend. Like the defense in the NHL is really tough. Like to play defense is really hard, and what you have in Gardner at least is you have a solid defense.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, I've been a critic of Gardner for his entire career, and then we'll get off of this. I've been a critic about him in his entire career. He's a one-way defenseman. He's valuable. But he's not somebody I would pay $7 million a year for because he can't play defense. As an offensive guy, as a power play quarterback, as a puck carrier, and there are things in his game that have value. It's just you have to protect him. You have to play certain minutes.
Right.
And when you're paying 6.5 to $7 million a year, you want that guy to be effective at both ends of the ice. And
honestly, he reminds me of Keith Yandel. Now, if he's your number one, then you need to keep him. But he's not the number one on the Leafs. And so I agree that they don't need to keep him for long term. But I think if they sign him for a couple of years, then they could solve the problem with the Seattle thing too. I think that's what they might try and do was at 3 years. If they sign him to a 3-year deal.
Right. I think they're going to try to extend Muzzin in the offseason, Russ. I mean, I think they didn't
try and extend both. I do.
Yeah, if they can, but anyway. So look,
they have to. I mean, the bottom line is, there are two things that they didn't go out and get at the deadline. Defense and goaltending are hurting them. Like those are the things that they needed to do. We talked about this a lot. Like I know.
And the perception is that they didn't get in return what they would want for. Because I believe if they take an early exit, what they're going to have to do is trade one of their abundant forwards.
Yeah, they have to.
Defenseman.
They have to, or just to have enough money to sign a defenseman. Like they're going to have to trade them one way or the other. They have to get. Yeah. They have to get.
Nylander, Janssen, Kapanen, one of them for defenseman.
You just can't have all that. I mean, it's all one sided. It's obvious. I mean, when all the goals they're giving up. I mean, the amount of goals they've given up since those two guys have gone down is incredible, and and they're still managing to win some games by outscoring teams like the Flyers the other night.
That's not going to work in the postseason.
No,
especially against a team like Boston. Boston will shut it down defensively. Yeah. Games will be 2-1, 3-2, or maybe bigger because Boston's power play is extremely effective. But anyway.
I'm also going to blame one more person on the Leafs, and that's Carlton Bear, because he put out a tweet that just said that the new St. Pat's jerseys are very nice. Maybe he should be doing less tweeting and more helping the team win.
My God.
I agree. I like those jerseys. I have one of those, but I do agree with you 100%.
He's Gritty's nemesis.
Yeah.
I didn't even know Carlton existed. That's how awesome he is.
Yeah, he is low down there. I mean, there aren't that many.
He tried to high five me on Friday, and I left him hanging.
I wonder how many each of us actually name. Like that's like the craziest thing. Like I could probably name 4.
We'll do that during the summer.
Yeah, that's the summer thing. But I could probably name 4 of them. I mean, you really don't know that many of them.
True.
But
And,
can I just I'll call into question again this stupid playoff system that we have, because right now, again, we have 10 games to go, and right now, if the season ended today, it'd be Boston versus Toronto, it'd be Washington versus Pittsburgh in the Metro, and it would be San Jose versus Vegas in the Pacific. I mean, honestly, if you went 1 through 8, or if you went with the 2 division winners at the top and then 3 through 8 point wise, the teams that have success in the regular season deserve to play an easier opponent instead of having, you're going to have the last 3 cup winners, Washington, Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh, one of them eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. It's stupid.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and I don't know. I mean, I understand the whole rivalry thing, but it baffles my mind, because I think rivalries, conference wide, are very easy to put together. Like, within the conference is
after 2 games, the teams hate each other. That's
we've seen it all the time, right? And it's just absolutely ridiculous. Like, I mean, I remember the Calgary, the Sabres Carolina rivalry was amazing for a while there, and they were playing in the same conference, but they had a really good playoff series that was amazing, and really pretty much the winner was going to win the Stanley Cup, and went 7 games. It was a great series. But yeah, I agree with you on that one totally.
Yeah, it's like that Tiger Woods Phil Mickelson rivalry that still exists.
Yeah, and okay, here's the big difference, folks. The teams that you play in your division, you play 4 times. The teams that you play in the other division in your conference, you play 3 times.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a big difference.
No,
that's going to really generate rivalries.
And part of that is because you keep expanding the teams, and you want to make sure and market the stars out across. So you have to play teams in the other conference and stuff.
Right.
It's you sometimes wonder what the NHL is really trying to achieve with the idea of rivalries and fan interest, because they sort of lean one way, then they kind of do something that leans it back the other way, and there's no real clear thing.
Divided, Peter. I mean, I've talked to people there. They're divided about this whole thing. They really,
I'll tell you what I think the marketing plan of this is, Peter, and Eck, you could tell me if I'm right or wrong. I think the marketing plan of this was when they first did this, they wanted to get back rivalries that we hadn't seen in 20 years, like Rangers Flyers, and then hold on to the fact that and bet against the gravitas of the conference finals and the cup just being so well watched, because the fans are into it at that point that it almost doesn't matter who's in it. But I think that part has waned, unfortunately.
Yeah, I do. I think you're dead on. I think the television ratings of the first 2 rounds are what they're looking at,
Right.
And I don't, so, if it's first through 8, I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters to NHL anymore. I don't think,
but don't you think that the ratings will go down if we see, Boston, Tampa for the 3rd year in a row, or
I agree. I mean, that series last year wasn't really that greatly rated outside of Boston. It was one of those. I mean, the interest. See, I think NHL sometimes puts too much into ratings, because the NHL ratings are kind of what they are. They are to a degree, and they're getting better all the time, which is wonderful. But they still are very much a local thing. Like, there are a lot of people who will not watch the playoffs anymore.
I mean, I do think the league's hoping for that Flyers Oilers Stanley Cup, because that would be tremendous.
Still possible, Russ. We'll see. No, so I don't know. It's anything's possible.
Yeah, I mean, there could be a solar eclipse tomorrow, but I don't think so.
Yeah,
I could get a date tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. But I think that no, I mean, I really don't. I don't think it's going to change. Like the big teams the big rating teams are like, say, like, Buffalo's a big rating team, Pittsburgh's a big rating team, the Rangers, the Flyers, the Capitals probably more so now than usual. But the Capitals aren't always a great rating team.
I'm waiting for that.
Kings Rangers was a very good rating grabber.
Yeah, you have the 2 largest cities in the country.
Yeah.
So that's always going to be the case. I mean, so obviously, you got the Islanders will get really good ratings, but these are teams but it doesn't matter who they're playing. Like, if the Flyers Penguins rating almost isn't as, I mean, if the Flyers ended up playing, like, say, Carolina, and just have, and Pittsburgh ended up playing, I don't know, Columbus, let's just say throw it out there for the reason, you're still going to get, you might get better ratings overall because the Flyers and Penguins are split up, like that. Yeah. And the people are going to watch both series, where, and I know you're looking for the one big hit on the one series, but sometimes, so I don't think that argument, I've had this argument with them too. And there are some who agree with me, and it's like basically 50-50, except I think the people at the very top like this, like I think
I think if you had Flyers Carolina, it would get split ratings even in your house, because half your house would be watching the game and half of them would be watching that documentary on Fozzie Bear. What's the difference?
I didn't see that documentary. Where's that?
It's not. I made it
up. Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, but let's get into this weekend. We had some interesting games this weekend for a second. And
which one grabbed you first?
So I mean,
I'm holding my breath.
No, there were a lot of them. I mean, and I'm not saying, no, I'm not. To me, the surprise thing was, yesterday and the last 2 days mainly were a lot of teams won that you wouldn't expect to win, and a lot of upsets happened, a lot of overtime games too. Like yesterday, 4 overtime games.
And those are the worst things to happen this time.
I know, and they are absolutely terrible.
Well, okay, this is the thing that I found interesting. It's like, teams that were in the race have sort of resorted back to form, and the team that first team that comes to mind here is the Montreal Canadiens, because Carey Price has improved to the point where I think he's back or close to being back to the goaltender that he was. He's played great, but the Canadiens have lost 5 of 8 games in March. They've scored 16 goals. They're averaging 2 goals a game. And I'm sorry, at 3 points behind Columbus and 4 points behind Carolina, I think they're done. Because
they are pretty. They have a tough schedule too for them too. They really are, and they're not. And you're right. I mean, the teams that are better teams, just are gearing it up. Like if you play Washington or Pittsburgh or St. Louis or San Jose right now, or even Chicago. Look at Chicago. What Chicago's doing? They're just gearing it up. And Chicago. I mean, they're not going to make the playoffs probably, but they've got the longest winning streak in the NHL right now.
Well, they have a game in hand on Arizona, and they're 5 points back.
They've got a shot, but
they don't have a shot. Come on, heck.
There's still 22 points out there for them, and I'm not saying that, and the fact of the matter of all this,
the only thing that makes me think that Chicago has a shot is the fact that Arizona is the team in the last wild spot, and I'm waiting for reality to strike when it comes to Arizona, because I don't know how they're doing it with mirrors.
But you're counting Minnesota, who's a point out. They're going to make it. They're the team that's going to make it.
I think so, but Minnesota has moments,
I don't think you're telling me Chicago's got a better chance than Minnesota? Is that what you're telling me?
No, I'm not saying that at all. No, Minnesota's got a better shot than Chicago. No questions asked. But Minnesota has the ability to lose it too. Like they can.
They haven't lost, even losing their 2 best players. They've been in it the whole time. They're 1 point out.
I think they're going to make it. I totally believe they will make it. I'm not saying they won't.
Look, Chicago's won 5 in a row. Minnesota's, I don't know what they've done. It's a 1 OT loss. I mean, Chicago may have peaked right away. But if you look at the last 10, Arizona's 7-2-1.
Yeah.
Chicago's 6-4. Minnesota's 4-3-3.
Yeah.
I don't know if Minnesota's got the ability to turn it around and run a streak if anyone else just plays to their streak. That's what I think the issue is.
I think that's a fair thing to say, but I think Dubnik could raise it just enough for them to get in. I'm not telling you they're getting in by a lot.
And the concern is, can Chicago maintain this ridiculously hot pace, which they're going to have to?
And Corey has to stay healthy.
Chicago has 2 games in hand, too. Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
2 games in hand.
On Minnesota, yeah.
2 games in hand. I mean, that's like and Chicago's schedule. Let's go through it for a second. Now, the first game they have to play, the first one is I'm sorry, looking at Arizona's schedule. Sorry, wrong schedule. Arizona's schedule, by the way, is pretty hard. But Chicago's schedule is not the greatest. But I mean, they end up with Vancouver. That's and then they have the Flyers.
That's a win.
Back to back with Colorado. Then they have Arizona, who they're chasing, right? Then they go on the road for Arizona, San Jose, and LA.
And there's your season right there. Back to back with Colorado, who's in between them, in the playoffs, and then Arizona, 3 games and 4 nights.
Right.
They come out of that with 4 or 5 of a possible 6 that they might have a chance.
They have a shot if they do that. So they have a shot.
But then they end the season through 4 games and 6 nights. Home to Winnipeg, home to St. Louis, home to Dallas, and at Nashville. Yeah, it will give Nashville immense pleasure to end the Hawks' chances.
Yes, the only thing they have there going for them is in those 3 in the finals. Like, take away Winnipeg for a second. Winnipeg really won't have much to play for there, probably at all. And then and even
tight race with Nashville still.
Yeah,
they could.
Yeah,
they could.
Winnipeg, yeah.
I think they'll take it. I think they'll run away with it by that point. I don't know. I just have it's just, but I mean, I think that if the St. Louis and Nashville battle could be going on for home ice advantage there. So two of those 3 last games could be really, big games for those teams, the Blues and the Preds. But
I don't think any of those teams are resting anybody. I really don't.
Yeah, I don't think they will either. But that's a tough one. The Arizona schedule is really hard too, by the way. And what's really interesting is the Tampa game tonight. Okay. And I wrote about this today because, I'm a big matchups guy. I like matchups for sure. And I'm a big fan of some teams having other teams' numbers. And this Arizona Tampa thing is fascinating because when I look at my projections for every game and I'm looking at who's coming up tonight, and it's coming up as, Arizona is going to win in regulation in Tampa. I'm like, what the hell is that about? How could that be possible? And went back to the last 3 years of these two teams. Last 3 years, 4-1 for Arizona, outscoring Tampa 22-12.
Why don't you bet Arizona tonight then?
And the one time they met this year, Tampa and Arizona, you know what happened?
Doesn't matter.
I'm not, and this is the funny thing.
We don't know what happened because you're smiling.
They won 7-2. Arizona beat them 7-1. I know exactly what happened. So 7-1. Arizona.
I wouldn't hitch my wagon to Arizona tonight if you paid me.
I know. And this brings up an interesting point. What kind of hockey fan are you? And I've thought about this. This is a good, fun question to talk about. What kind of hockey fan are you? Are you a
smart one?
Are you an ice is half frozen or an ice is half thawed hockey fan? Okay. This is
whatever's the negative. That's me.
Right, and you're definitely ice is half thawed. Okay. But for me, I'm obviously more like ice is half frozen guy. Like
yesterday, my glass of Guinness was half empty.
Right.
There you go.
There you have it. Right. So, I think that, it is interesting. You could look at this game tonight with Arizona and Tampa in 2 different ways. You could look at it like, okay, Tampa's due, or you could look at it in 3 different ways. You could look at it like it doesn't matter what's happened before with these teams at all. That tonight, Tampa's going to just blow them out of the water. Mm-hmm. Or you could look at it like, Tampa's due to win. All these things, after all this times, they had 7-1 loss. They're definitely going to avenge that, right? Or you could look at it like Arizona just is on such a roll, and Tampa is not playing the greatest right now, that this could actually turn into an Arizona win tonight.
Wait, so going from 3-5 to today, they beat the Jets 5-2. They lost 3-0 to the Wild. They beat the Red Wings 3-2. They beat the Leafs 6-2. They beat the Red Wings 5-4. So they beat. You say it's hard to beat a team twice in a week's time. They did it. They beat the Capitals 6-3. They're playing great.
No, the Capitals
loss, and they're scoring 6 goals a game. 6.
I know, but look at the 2 games, the 2 Red Wing games you're talking about. They win each by 1 goal.
Win is a win is a win.
I know, and they're Tampa, and they probably will win tonight. Okay,
probably.
But it is curious when something like this comes up. This drastic of a difference,
Right.
It is. By
the way, Edmonton is 7 points behind Arizona.
They're right in it, Mike.
Yeah. They're still toast. And their goal differential is -33 with one of the best forwards in history. One of the best forwards in the league.
Do you realize that there's not one team within 40 goals of Tampa in goal differential?
No, it's crazy. And
Calgary's the next closest. It goes Tampa at +93.
Yeah.
And then the Flames at +50.
Yeah. That's just insane. Tampa's having an unbelievable season.
They are so ripe to blow it in the playoffs. It's going to be the perfect story.
It really is, and it's a tough. It's one of those things that it's just this is too much dominance. You know what I mean? Whenever you see too much dominance, it's like it depends who they play, of course.
The thing that springs to mind immediately is Washington 2 years ago running away with it. And the fact that down the stretch they sort of like became lackadaisical because they had such a big lead. I don't perceive that because there's a hunger there with Tampa because of their past playoff failures to really, put the pedal to the metal. But the thing is, again, they come up against Pittsburgh in the first round or somebody like that. It's tough to that could be a scary matchup for them.
I do want to say this. There's something going on in the chat room, and Shifty brought up a point where he said Dylan Strome's playing much better than he had been. Right. I question that, actually. I think if you go back, and again, we go back to his first pro year in the AHL after only playing 21 games in the NHL, he was more than a point a game. Then they bring him up. They don't find him any chemistry with anybody, and then they trade him, and now he's 44 points in 47 games. DeBrincat helps, but I don't think he's playing that much better. I think all he needed was the right chemistry and the right coaching. I think that was the big failing of Arizona.
Yeah. I also think that, remember, he was a number 3 overall pick, okay? Arizona was expecting him to be a number 1 center based on where he was drafted, based on him being a big body. He is perfectly fit in as the number 2 slotted behind Jonathan Toews. Toews gets the best checkers, and Strome sort of flies under the radar, playing with DeBrincat, a guy he's comfortable with. It's perfect. I think that the expectation in Arizona was there that, this guy's a bust because he's not producing at a level of number 1 center. Well, first of all, you didn't give him a lot of opportunities. Second of all, you didn't give him wingers to really play with.
No.
So his success in Chicago it's a coup for Stan Bowman in terms of, getting him at his lowest possible value for Nick Schmaltz, who's a good player, but it's injured. But now Chicago, they signed him to a contract this summer, probably for 4 or 5 years. They got a great value as a number 2 answer behind Toews. It frees him up to trade Anisimov, and they're right back. You got a 1-2 punch there.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, remember, Strome went ahead of Mitch Marner. He went ahead of Mikko Rantanen.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
He went ahead of Barzal.
Yeah. Doesn't look so bad now.
Yeah. No, definitely not. There's a good article in the Hockey News about the Strome to DeBrincat thing. And it's definitely worth checking out how well they played together. And obviously, that was a part of their thinking here in Chicago, which was a great move for them. And Strome was the kind of guy that just didn't make any sense that he wasn't playing well in the NHL to me. Like, of all the guys.
Yeah, but you know what? I think an alternative universe thing that could have happened. Had they held on to Strome at the deadline, maybe they could have traded for Connor Brown, a former teammate, and maybe they would have had chemistry as well. And then he would have stayed in Arizona and he'd still be putting up a lot of points. And Brown would actually be getting more opportunity too. Just saying, just an alternative universe feel that I have.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's absolutely. It seemed like Strome was on because I'm not, and I've seen prospects. You've seen a ton of prospects that look great. Rusty thought it didn't make it. I don't see as many as you do, but when I watch Strome play, whenever I watched him play, because he was on TV a lot in for Team Canada and stuff like that. Sure. He always incredibly impressed by him. He just looked like he looked like an NHL player for sure. And so now we're seeing it come through for sure. I mean. The season that Barkov is having in Florida is really going unnoticed.
It's a shame. You're right.
I mean, he's having a crazy season, for a team that's not going to make the playoffs and, just continually runs into the same boat where they're playing better now, but they're way too far out of it.
Right. And again, resorting back to the form that we thought these teams were going to be at the beginning of the season, the Panthers, their season was derailed by one thing: the injuries to Roberto Luongo and the ineffectiveness of their backup goaltending and James Reimer.
Right.
That their season was over with once Luongo went down and Reimer had to take over as a number 1. Now, I think that they're probably going to rectify that this summer because if they do get in on Bobrovsky is going to be somebody who starts 60 to 65 games. But how many times does the same thing have to happen before you get knocked over the head and say, oh, geez, that's the problem?
Yeah.
I mean, so the Vegas Golden Knights, they win last night, and really just, if Edmonton's hopes were, they're totally gone now.
Don't.
I'm just telling you. I was ready, guys. I was ready. If the Flyers lost to Pittsburgh in regulation last night, I was ready to come in today and then say,
"Oh yeah."
What does 1 point do? They're only back to where
they
they
lost
were
in
2
regulation.
weeks ago.
They lost in regulation last night. I was 18 seconds away from saying, okay, guys, you're right. The Flyers don't have a chance to make the playoffs.
So, by the way, did Malkin and Letang not playing have anything to do with that game or no?
It doesn't matter, Russ.
Right. I know a win's a win. I get that. But
I mean, it doesn't really matter at all. And, they've had,
How are we going to do this?
I'm not going to fight about this today.
The calendar advanced, and they're no closer than they were 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. The team that people have to think about in that division, okay, in this conference, the team that can fall out of it, everyone's looking at Columbus has to fall apart. The team that has to fall apart is Carolina.
Right.
And
they're not going to fall apart.
I want you to look at Carolina's schedule the rest of the way.
It doesn't matter. I don't even care. You can look at it and you can cite it. I'm just saying from my perspective, the coaching's been solid. They have the best defense of any of these teams that are on the bubble, and it's probably even better than Columbus's at this point. I don't see them falling out. They're getting just enough goaltending. That's going to keep them in it.
All right. Let me just go through the schedule, and you tell me that there's no way.
Pretty ugly.
There's no way that they could collapse on the schedule. Okay, they have 4 games on the road starting to start. Well, they've already played 1 game on the road against Buffalo. They have 4 more games on the road. Okay, tomorrow night they're in Pittsburgh. Then they go to Tampa. Then they go to Minnesota, and then they go to Montreal. Okay, Montreal. Give them a win in Montreal. Give them a win in Minnesota, maybe.
Minnesota or Pittsburgh, they'll probably win one of the two.
Right, so they win one of those 2. So that gives them 4 more points from where they are now. Then they have a home and home, 26th at home, 28th on the road with the Capitals. All right, so let's say they get 1 point out of that, or I don't know. Do they manage to get a point out of that? Do they win one of those games?
I don't play in this exercise. So you can ask
I'm just saying.
I just don't. I never did.
Say the Capitals sweep them just for the hell of it. All right. Then they have the Flyers in Philly. All right, which is going to be, which if the Flyers are still playing well, and if Carolina has played like we just said they could possibly play, a huge game because the Flyers and Carolina will be close to each other at that point, right? Then after they leave Philly and they have a back-to-back because they come home against the Penguins again.
Okay.
Then they go to Toronto. Then they have their last 2 games are home against New Jersey, so they'll get a point out of that, or 2 points out of that, say. And then they end their season in Philadelphia again. So this is the Carolina's schedule is just not. And
they're 20-14-3 on the road.
They are 20-14.
They've been able to survive this all year and manage to bleed out points.
Now they have to go to Pittsburgh, Tampa, Washington, Philly twice.
Yeah, but Eck, you know what's going to happen in that Philly series? They're going to bleed out points, and that's going to kill the Flyers. The Flyers are not going to beat them both of those games.
No, you're probably right.
And that's what they're going to do along this whole way about all these teams that we're talking about.
Point here, point there.
Bleed out points now.
Right, but if they don't get enough points, and if they get a point here and a point there, but they still have to win a couple of these games. They have to outright win a couple of these games, and they might. But then they're going to beat New Jersey, like we said, and say we'll give them a win against one of Tampa or Minnesota or Minnesota or Montreal. They really, I'm telling you.
You realize if there's a tiebreaker, the Flyers' road wins is the worst of any of these teams we're talking about.
Yeah. There's no question about that. Tiebreaker. And I'm not saying that, whether it comes down to tiebreaker or not. And I'm not saying it's going to be the Flyers. I'm just saying that it could be Columbus too. It could be Montreal.
Is Florida in it now because they're 2 points behind the Flyers? I'm just asking for a friend.
Not due to their schedule the rest of the way now.
Okay. I'll hang up and listen to your answer. I want to ask this question because it's close to home here. Get the input of everyone here. Sabres are 31-32-9. They beat St. Louis yesterday in a shootout 4-3. They have 71 points. They're doing much better than they did last year, but the Sabres fan base are pissed off. After the 10-game winning streak, I think their expectations were that this team was at least going to challenge for the playoffs. They're 13 points behind Columbus, so they're not in the race. And now after 2 seasons, I know that Mike Harrington in the Buffalo News said that one of the only answers might be to fire Phil Housley, and a lot of the fan base are, at the point where they're looking for answers. And I think that also the organization is probably going to be concerned that the drop off in season tickets that happened last year will continue this year with another bad season. The question is whether they're justified in firing Housley or they're just making him a scapegoat. And Russ, I think I don't know if Botterill wants to go down the road of jettisoning Housley after 2 years, because then the target switches to him.
Yeah, he won't. He's not going to do that. He's not going to listen to what the fan base is saying. He has seen enough out of his team this things, and he'll give Housley another year, and he'll give him more players next year. And then next year is a big year for Housley. Like, he probably has to make the playoffs. If he doesn't, then he will have problems, and he probably would be out.
I don't
think he's going to jettison him now.
Yeah. I don't think Buffalo is served by making a coaching change right now, because you got to find some level of stability instead of reactionary stuff, given all the things you've done with the team. It doesn't mean Housley should be the coach and will be the coach, but launching him off season would seem it would say that it would instill the idea that you believe you know what the problem is with the team and that you've isolated it and that you know who can fix it.
Agreed.
And if you haven't, you're right back to where you were 2 years ago, and it's a mess.
Right.
And then what do you do?
Right.
I totally agree with Russ. You may have to can him in April or in November next season, but at least you can see where the problem is. Right now, you may not be sure what the problem is.
And I think
ideas, but you may not be sure.
And I think Russell will agree with this. I mean, they have pieces that I think are talented and valuable.
They do.
I mean, Eichel's is really good. And I think I don't know if he's a franchise player, but I think he's a number one center, and he can dominate games at times. They need to re-sign Skinner, whether that they can or not, we'll see. I think Reinhardt is talented, but everybody looks at him being a former number 2 overall pick and expects more. Middlestat is 19 years old, so he's going to develop. They don't have enough scoring. I think they have 5 goals in double figures. That's the thing that kills them, is that they don't have a lot of offense. Their lineup is sort of strewn with the Vladimir Sobotkas and the Connor Sheary's, who has been exposed as a creation of Sidney Crosby, because he really hasn't done much this year. And on defense, Ristolainen and Dahlin are really good, but could you please buy out Zach Bogosian? That contract is an anchor, and this guy does nothing. Absolutely freaking nothing.
I agree. I think next year you could be looking at, Pekka Luukkonen in the AHL. So even if everything goes tits up, for lack of a better term, they'll still have a goalie of the future there.
Yeah,
you can make the face. Like, it's just what came.
I was just reading something that was funny. That's all.
Okay, and then
no, but to your point, Russ, the thing is, he's at least 2 years away, and you've got Hutton on a long-term deal, and you've got Ullmark, who I think the last month or so has proved I don't think he's ready to be a number 1 unless the team is really improved in front of him. So you're sort of stuck with the same goaltending.
Well, yes, the same goaltending, yes. Although they could play Ullmark more. Right. And see what they have in them. They definitely could do that. I think Olofsson could help now. I think next year that would add some offense to them. Like, there's some other players that could definitely help them.
But if they don't fire Housley, I think they probably need to make a major acquisition, either in free agency or by trade, to sort of get the fan base believing again.
I think they need to lock up Skinner. Yeah, they have to do that. That's their major acquisition. I think that is the one that they can't walk away from that and not have Skinner. If they don't, rather, then they could be looking at a team that just, you don't know what direction they're going. If they lock up Skinner, I think everybody knows the direction they're going. And then, again, they got Marcus Davidson, right?
Yeah.
Marcus Davidson has 27 points over in Dewgarden. He's 20 years old. He might get a look next year. He's been playing against men. That could add him some offense. Yeah. Like, they have some guys that they could bring over that nobody is seeing right now that could possibly add them some offense and get those other Sobokas and everybody else out of there. And I think that's what they're going to do. I think that's their best bet, but they've got to lock up Skinner. Like, that's massive.
Yeah. No, they definitely do. They definitely do. And I think, I've Sabres fans came up to me the other night just at an event I was attending, and they're just like, they wanted Housley fired. There's definitely a cough right now. There's no question about that. But it is a little bit like, I do agree exactly with what Peter said. It would really, they need some stability there, and they need to, and it's not. I don't think it was on Housley. I mean, part of it was they are improving.
But here's the delusion of grandeur that Sabres fans are under. And I'm not doing this to attack them. I'm just saying, you got to realize, know your role, know your place. Joel Quenneville's not coming to Buffalo. He's not.
No.
I don't care how much money Terry Pegula is going to throw at him. He's not coming to Buffalo. Bruce Boudreau, if he gets fired by Minnesota, maybe, because he's from the Toronto area, and he'd be up for a challenge. But no big-time head coach.
Why Quenneville would definitely not come to Buffalo.
What's that?
Either, but I'm just curious why you think Quenneville. Why you're so sure about that?
Because there are other
make a bigger splash than that.
Yeah, there are other opportunities. Heck, he could go to Edmonton with McDavid. He could go to LA. I mean, he's never I don't think he's going to Philadelphia. I really don't.
I want him to, but I don't think he's going there either. I agree.
Yeah, he could go to Minnesota. He's never coached outside of the Central Division. He could be the replacement in Minnesota.
He could be.
I don't know.
I just think he's a Western Conference coach, and he's going to have opportunities out there. I mean, if it's with McDavid, hey, he's won Stanley Cups. He's won 3 Stanley Cups.
Yeah, he's going to interview with all these teams. He'll stay in his comfort zone. Mike, I mean, Olofsson has 53 points, 24 goals in the AHL in his first season. He had 43 points last year in Frölunda. Whose numbers were similar to that before he came into the NHL? Elias Pettersson.
Yeah, and
I'm not saying he's as good as him, but I'm saying he can have an impact.
No, he's a little older. I was going to say his numbers are similar to Andreas Janssen with the Leafs because he's 23. He won the SHL Rookie of the Year. He scored a ton in Sweden. He came over. He's led the Marlies to a Calder Cup, and now he's got 20 goals in the NHL. I mean, Olofsson, and now he was a 7th-round pick too. So Olofsson could very well be in the NHL next year. But what I'm saying is they need more than just the advancing a middle stat and Olofsson. I think they need another scoring forward on top of re-signing Skinner, and they also need to upgrade their defense as well. So it's going to be a task. But I mean, I don't think Botterill is going to throw Housley under the bus.
No. All right, 3 stars of this week.
Oh, of course. I knew that. I knew it.
There we go.
I absolutely knew it.
Come on, Eck. Who are they?
I'm so right. I mean, I guess, like I told you, I have to listen to me more often. I'm not just a rumor guy. Thomas Greiss, goalie for the New York Islanders.
Nostra Eklund.
1.25 goals against average, .959 save percentage. A shutout. And just crazy numbers, really in hugely important games for the Islanders, because the Islanders were going the wrong direction going into last week. The Islanders needed a week like this from Greiss in the worst possible way. I mean, this is an MVP. I mean, there were some signs last week. Like, we remember when the Flyers knocked the Islanders off twice in 4 days, or whatever they did back 2 weeks ago, that the Islanders could actually be in trouble, like real trouble. Greiss had the kind of week that just completely, put that back to rest and put them now back tied at top of the division. I don't think they're going to end up at the top of the division, but they're back tied at top of the division with Washington. So that's not even the most interesting one, though. The real interesting one, I think, and we were talking about Chicago, is Brandon Perlini, another Arizona guy that they got from Arizona. We talked about Strome, but Perlini, 7 points in 3 games, it's just a hat trick. Just against Arizona too, right? On top of it all, right? So just like crazy. I mean, he's really.
And then he had a goal and 2 assists against Toronto, who his dad played a cup of coffee for back in the, I think, late 70s or early 80s. Fred Perlini.
A guy that's always had a great shot, but was going to need time to develop because he's a bigger guy. And I think that one I won't blame Arizona as much for, because I think he is just developing at a big man's pace.
Yeah. How old is Perlini? He's like
23, maybe
3 or 4.
Yeah,
probably 23 is probably
22.
Right.
Actually, he's 22. Sorry.
Yep.
He is from. You know what country he's from?
Toronto. He's from.
That's a country.
Not a country.
In Mike's world.
He is from Guildford, England.
His dad.
I'm sure his parents are from
His
there.
dad. No. His dad was playing in the British Hockey League at the time. He's
22-year-old Guildford, England native.
Yeah, he's from the Toronto area.
Yeah, but
That's like saying Steve Thomas is from England.
Right. The Canadians had this defenseman. He probably retired 4 years ago, and it said New York, New York, but it was because his dad was a hockey player. He was never in New York.
Do you remember?
You grew up by the Queen anyway, right, Peter?
Do you remember Rick Chartres?
Yeah.
Rick Chartres was Montreal Canadiens defenseman. He was born in Caracas, Venezuela.
Yeah.
I do want to point out the March 12th, 2011-2012 season when Ilya Bryzgalov was the number 1 star, Ilya Kovalchuk was the number 2 star, and Karel Halak was the number 3 star, to point out the importance of this.
All right. So if they get to so you say in the playoffs, if Leonard's healthy,
it's Leonard.
We're going back to Leonard 100%, right?
Leonard.
All right.
It's Leonard. It's not even a question.
How could it not be a question? Their numbers are not that far.
All right. Question.
Oh, man. Peter, anything?
Nothing.
You're wise.
Connor McDavid.
Connor
McDavid, 3rd star. He can get 9 points in a week. You know, it just if you're Connor McDavid, that gives you a 3rd star, 9 points in a week. It's just kind of crazy, but you know, he's nuts. He's nuts. Absolutely. You know, and it's unbelievable to me that Edmonton can't do better than they do with that. You know, it's just it is
it's not. They suck. They really do. I mean, other than the couple of the best forwards in the league.
Well,
I don't make the
name I keep hearing now that Kelly McCrimmon is going to be the guy who takes over this.
Well, they haven't even interviewed him yet because Vegas,
they're not allowed.
Vegas has denied them interviewing him until
Vegas. That's all I want to say.
What's up?
Yeah, it's good for Vegas. I hate when teams allow people who are still part of their team to interview while their team's still playing. I'm not a big fan of that.
One of the big positives for Edmonton, which will cost them now this year, is that Alex Chason has 20 goals for them.
Yeah, that he'll be a $3 million forward next year at least.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting talk about Ottawa, and nothing to do with Melnick, but in terms of the their coaching search and who they might be going after, the names of DJ Smith, the Leafs assistant, has come up. I know Elliot Friedman mentioned it on the headlines on Saturday. Jacques Martin has been mentioned because they think that he can work with the young players and develop them. Troy Mann, their AHL coach in Belleville, has also been mentioned. So, you know, they're not going for big names because they know this team is going to be a developmental team for the next couple of years. So, I mean, I think that's a good decision because they're not going to win anything.
I do want to point out their worst signing of the year, and that was Ty Ratty. Remember, I wasn't very high on it. 4 goals, 11 points in 45 games.
And that was playing half the time with McDavid.
I think the exact point total he put up in the preseason, right? Like something like crazy like that. Like he had.
Well, remember he scored at the end of the year with Edmonton. That's
right, and in the preseason he was nuts. Like he had at least 11 points in the preseason.
Right.
All right, so
he had 9 points in 14 games last year for Edmonton.
If all Ottawa fans haven't turned off after Mike's ringing endorsement, we're going to now go to the draft lottery simulator.
All right, let's do it.
We'll definitely have them tuning out. So thanks for watching Ottawa. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. All right. That was for Ottawa only. He doesn't want to watch this. Here we go. Okay. Here we go. The Draft Lottery Simulator from Tankathon.com. Coming up now. Here it is. It is the Los Angeles Kings.
Wow.
Who could use some speed? Jack Hughes as the number 2 behind.
They would take Jack Hughes and they would probably just say, "We're good for the draft. Thank you."
I would think so.
Yeah,
I would think so very much.
That would be massive for them.
Yep. Yeah.
Hey, maybe they'll draft Capo Caco.
Anything else? Like the Canucks moved up a little bit. You know, the Senators moved down. They'd be happy. People in Ottawa would be happy. Actually, they should have watched. Okay.
That's that funny thing is that's the best case scenario for Ottawa. Colorado drafting 4th.
I know.
Well, you see, that's the other thing is like goalie FP was like, "Hey, Rangers are getting 3rd." That's how you know this draft lottery run wasn't the right one because that won't happen either.
That's moving up quite a bit. I know. All right. So not only 4 games tonight, and the kind of like, you know, in the scheme of things, not big. Yeah. Not a magical night, except for what we'll all be watching, which is the exciting Arizona upset of Tampa. So keep your eye on that game, guys, and remember you saw it here. So tomorrow you all come
Vegas San Jose could be pretty good.
Fleury's out though. Fleury's not playing.
Fleury's not playing. Yeah,
it's Malcolm Subban. There you go.
Still okay.
That changes the thing.
It does change things, but I think so. But I'll definitely be watching Arizona Tampa. So that tomorrow, just like today with Bryce, you'll be able to say yes, Ak, you were right.
Hold on, one last thing, Ak.
Yes.
Yesterday there was a stick throwing incident at
yeah. Sorry.
And Georgiev, like, he wound up and threw it, right? And I don't know, was this Bishop in goal? I wasn't sure who was.
I'm going to I do have it on my thing here.
But if they're going to try and tell us, if the league is going to try and tell us that he lost grip of the stick, I am not buying it.
No.
Because this is literally the only way you could stop Elias Pettersson from scoring on a penalty shot, and he should have been awarded a goal.
It's
here we go.
It's insane. 2 referees, 2 linesmen, and no one saw it. What on God's green earth were they looking at?
This is a penalty shot. There's not like anything else to look at.
There's nothing else. So not only is the penalty shot not necessarily a rare thing, it's happening all the time, and they watch the net.
So
the player.
Okay.
It's watch here.
Oh, there it goes.
You'll see it better in the highlight too. Like I'll show you bigger.
And that's Khudobin, not
it's Khudobin, yeah.
I'm getting any bigger here.
That's why I wasn't sure who was in that.
Advertisements all over the place.
Yeah, we don't want to buy it.
No.
I don't want to buy a microwave.
There we go. So no, this was crazy. My internet's really strange, but here's a better angle a little bit. Yeah, that's like the definition of throwing it.
Yeah, he threw it. I mean,
there's an official standing right in the corner watching.
The overhead one is the worst.
Thrown, and then he got it back. And
the overhead one. This is like the craziest one. This one,
they completely missed it.
That's a David Leggio special. Except
that is like that's like setting a trap for like a duck, or something.
Yeah.
The duck. Throw the stick at him. There he is.
The NHL needs to bring in every red stripe referee at the end of the season. Before the playoffs, they need to bring them all into a room and bring up their worst calls to all of them and say, it's not that this is bad, and give a level, or actually better yet, A, B, C, D, your job's in jeopardy. Like that's like of all the bad calls, and show them and say, how do you make this? How do you
know what they do is they have,
then you send them back to the playoffs, pick your crews or whatever it is, off you go. And at the end of the season, you review there's got to be some level of accountability, and it doesn't come from Stephen Walcom because he's a clown.
Peter, there's only one problem. There's only 72 hours in between the end of the regular season and the beginning of the playoffs. It's not enough.
That's enough to fly around the world twice. So get them in.
But they did such bad calls that they're.
What they need to do. I mean, what they do. I don't know if I talked to a ref one time, and they did this a couple years ago. I'm sure they still do it now. Is that when they leave a game, the refs leave with like an iPad full of like the highlights of the game. That's like an.
We're not watching them,
and they take them on the plane, and they're supposed to hear it, and it's totally analyzing everything they do wrong. So they absolutely are supposed to see them, now whether or not.
Wait, but we again with the Ovechkin play, wasn't that a call from New York where they said, you got to give him the goal even though it was non-goal on the ice because
that was from New York, and I didn't think that was
in Toronto saw that Khudobin didn't have his stick after he threw it, and then it magically got back to him.
Yeah.
Somebody saw that.
That is crazy. I mean, with all the crazy highlights and replay stuff that we saw this weekend that we didn't see that happened there is just nuts. Like that wasn't. I mean, the Flyers Penguins replay that was incredible. I mean, like you have like a goal taken, and it was offside, but it was the funniest thing. Like the Flyers first argued that it wasn't goal interference. They said it was a goal, and then the Penguins say, but it was offsides, so it's not a goal. So there was two plays on the same play. That was brand new. I was two challenges back to back. The Flyers had no more moves to go.
Yeah, I mean, look, even the refs at the NCAA level, 3-0 game, Penn State's up. It's still in the second period. Ohio State gets a goal, and then they get it taken off the board because they said, well, he didn't really have possession of it, so it was offsides, even though he was onside. It's like, how much possession do you need of it? It's like,
right.
It's like, does a hockey player How many times do we see guys that are saving the puck, keeping it in when they're on the power play? How much possession do they have of it then?
Exactly.
Come on.
No, it's ridiculous. So all the time we have, guys, for today. Enjoy the games tonight. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about Arizona's victory. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you then.